So for my first track, I was approached by an animation student in her third year who wanted help with the music for her last project of third year, her final assessment, and this is her film called Duty. The film has inspirations from Japanese anime influences. It's about this character who really enjoys kind of collecting things and putting them into their collection diary that they're holding, but this amulet on their neck is telling them to go up this mountain and kind of fulfill their duty, in air quotes. It follows them up this mountain, tells them to go up this mountain, and then finally their duty is fulfilled, and that's kind of the end of the film, and it's a happier ending. It was inspired because this animation student really liked having her own projects on the go, but she felt like she was being bogged down by uni work. This part represents her own projects, and then the amulet telling her to go up this mountain is like the uni climax. There's 3 sections of this film, essentially. There's this happy forest scene, there's this blizzard mountaintop scene, and then the last section is this icy temple mountain scene. That's essentially 3 pieces that I had to compose. As you can see, there are quite a lot of layers here. In looking back, I probably should have made 3 different Logic files for each different section, because it's obviously quite CPU intensive. For the first section here, it's very much pizzicato string-based melody in a major key. There's some percussion in the background. It's all very happy and quite Disney-esque. As it gets to this part, when the mountain is in sight, it transitions into a minor key with staccato strings and also some bassy orchestral drums, just to try and get the vibe of this character's in danger. And then as we get to this section here, I wanted to reflect the kind of icy, airy tones of being on top of a mountain, so I included like a airy drone to go through the back, and also some reverberated high strings to kind of reflect the interior. I'm assuming this was like hard surfaces that would reverberate and echo, so I wanted to reflect that as well. And then as the film comes to its end, I wanted to reflect them completing their mission by having a big kind of orchestral rise. So I had a cymbal rise, I had a reverse bass drum to kind of reflect the rumbling of the tree, and it transitions into this quite pretty melody with high piano and strings until the end. So it's kind of a development of themes, a development of moods throughout the whole thing, but they all kind of relate to one another, which was what I tried to do. They all sound like they're supposed to be in the same film, I think. It's just different vibes in different locations. But yeah, I'm quite happy with how this turned out, and it was very fun to work on. Okay, so for this piece, I was approached by a second year film student who was a director of this short film that they were working on. It's called Rocket, and it basically focuses on a mum who lost her 6-year-old son. He tragically died quite suddenly, and she's very upset, and the film kind of explores how she's developing her emotions and how she's dealing with this traumatic experience. And it focuses on the son whose favourite toy was a rocket ship. And so the mum decides to recreate this rocket ship in real life out of like homemade things and just kind of scraps and stuff like that. So this is where my music comes in this scene. She's entering what she's created in memory of her son for the first time. It's very emotional. It's a pivotal moment of the film. And so I wanted to reflect that in the music. So there's no dialogue or sound in this scene. It was purely focused as a music-based scene. So there was quite a lot of pressure on me as the composer to deliver the emotional package that they wanted for this scene. So yeah, it starts off quite simple in terms of instrumentation and melody and harmony and stuff. I have this drone going through, which is this here, Airways, and it's slowly getting louder and louder, but it's kind of still in the background, just create this ambience, and some pedal piano note, high piano just going through this. So for the first half of this scene, it's very much quite sparse in terms of musicality. There's a high piano and a drone in the background, but I wanted to keep it as minimal as possible because I wanted the audience to kind of focus on the character and kind of how she would be feeling. And I guess the sparseness in the music correlates to her feeling the wonder of what she's created. She's in awe of what's happening right now, and she's living in her son's memory. I just feel like if the music was busy here, it just wouldn't work because it's just such a powerful scene in its own right and doesn't need much going on to trigger the emotional response that was needed. So the first half of the scene is all major, I wanted to create kind of like this happier tone to it. And then as the scene comes into its second half, she realises that she's never going to see her son again. It transitions to a minor key with still major chords in it, so there's still happier inflections, but it's a more somber tone. And the strings are quite in full force here. As the scene progresses, it gets louder and louder because they're watching a moon landing, which is in relation to her son's love of space and rockets and everything. And the camera starts shaking to replicate the rumbling of a rocket taking off. So I wanted to reflect that in the music. So the music gets busier and louder as the scene progresses. It just gets more intense. It builds up to this last moment here. It's a big crescendo in the strings, a big piano kind of double octave thing. It gets louder and more intense, and then as this shot comes in, everything drops out apart from the high reverberated piano and just goes back to the beginning vibes of the scene. It's the very last few shots, and I just wanted to create kind of a contrast in the expanse of space and the expanse of the rocket taking off and like this big thing happening, whereas the close-up represents she's just happy that she has the memory of her son in this thing that she's created. Thank you for listening.